Thanks, Brian. Hey, everybody, this is the progress report for this Wednesday. It's August 14th.
It is.
You know what that means? We're halfway through August.
It means it's the day after National Lefty Day.
Really?
Which I celebrate being a lefty, yes.
Really? My daughter's a
Celebrate it
lefty.
all the
I'll have
time.
to send her a nice note. saying-
My dad was a lefty, and
One of the top 10%. You know?
yeah, and my grandson Anthony is a lefty. So we got some lefties, yeah.
There's some great lefties in the world. Harry Truman was a lefty.
Yeah, Whitey Page was a lefty. Whitey Ford was a lefty. Joe Page was a lefty.
Chris Sale's a lefty.
Yeah, Chris Sale had a good night.
He had a
did
good
have a
night
good
last
night,
Yeah,
yeah.
well,
and got his 2,000th strikeout.
he got his. But we have to figure out what the hell happened to the Red Sox this year. But that's not the subject for tonight's show, folks.
No, geez, I thought that's what we were going to be doing.
Well, it would be worth it.
We got bigger fish to fry.
It's almost ready for the autopsy on the 2019 Red
Oh,
Sox.
heck no, there's plenty of
But
time.
plenty of time. Yeah, we've been saying that.
Was it 13 games? Not a big deal.
Yeah.
Well, they won today.
Oh, did they?
They did win today.
Okay.
And I think, what's his name, hit a couple of home runs. The shortstop hit 2 home runs.
Bogarts?
Bogarts, which was really something. And Cleveland's a tough team. and
They're a good team.
Oh, yeah, they're
Very
on the
good,
rise right
and-
now.
and
First
they-
place in the
They're
Central
managed
Division.
by one of our great heroes
Right.
in Red Sox history,
Right, Tito is a
Tito Francona.
Tito Francona.
We will never think badly of Tito, will
No,
we? After
no, he was
2004.
a great manager and
Yeah.
has had great success in Cleveland. Great
Yeah,
success
yeah.
in Cleveland.
Well, he's a fine baseball guy and
Yes,
a good
quality
guy.
Quality guy.
So anyhow, we're diverging into here into baseball talk, and we really
I
want
thought that's what this was. We're just going to have a chat
Well,
with Senator D'Alessandro.
We have
and-
Senator
could do that.
D'Alessandro. If there's one thing, he's an educator and he's a sports guy. He's both. So that's very appropriate. But he's also the chair of Senate Finance. And he is wrestling with the fact that we have, for the first time since Maggie Hassan was governor, when we had a gubernatorial veto of a budget. And that didn't work out too well for her or for the state of New Hampshire, as it turned out. And we thought maybe we'd be past that, but this time,
This one's a doozy.
this one's a
It is.
doozy. This
It
one's
is.
a doozy. And as Senator Lou has said on this program and in other venues as well, you should be concerned because the state budget affects every citizen of New Hampshire. Everybody's affected.
Especially
either
us here
personally
in Manchester.
Right. Oh,
or
for
Especially
sure.
us in
and
Manchester.
especially in our cities and towns that
Yes.
stood to get major revenue,
Yes.
a return of revenue sharing
Right.
and educational help and all these wonderful things all came crashing down with the gubernatorial veto. And the result of that is that at the last minute, with knowing that the veto was imminent, or maybe it had happened, but we knew it was coming, or could come, we passed a continuing resolution in June to
Yes.
continue the funding at the prior budget state level for 3 months, which is up next month, right?
Right, it's up at the end of September.
So, there's another crunch coming. This is
Yes.
a big, big crunch.
Yep.
And there's only a few people in Concord, including Senator Lou, chair of Senate Finance, Mary Jane Wallner, chair of the House Finance, and I guess the Senate President and the Speaker, and maybe a few more, are having to negotiate with Governor Sununu to try and get to the point where we are not running on a continuing resolution,
Right.
but we'll actually have a budget that can help the citizens of New Hampshire.
Can I take a second just to jump in and explain what a continuing resolution is? It
Sure.
basically
That's a
is
good idea.
It's an agreement by the legislature and the governor to continue, hence the name, running the government on the same budget that actually ended in July.
Right.
The last budget we had. The problem with that, though, is because that budget included some very harmful tax cuts that would kick in
They've already kicked in.
that have kicked in. So
Yep.
thank you for the
Right.
clarification.
They've
But
already kicked
so what that does is it's almost like a zombie that has extended beyond its own life, and it has cut revenue for this year so that the revenue isn't available even to continue at current rates. Have I come close?
Right. If you looked at the July returns are lower than the July returns of a year ago.
Because the rates have been.
Well, the rates
They went into effect automatically.
Right, they went into effect in January for both the BPT and the BET. So your premise is correct. And as a result of that, you're spending at 3/12 of the 19 adjusted authorized budget. And you're using the lapses in the 19 budget to pay for the pay raise, which was put in place but not funded for the second for the continuing year, the 2020 year. So we have a problem, and I think the problem can be dealt with. I think the governor has said he's amenable to some change. I think the legislature is amenable to some change, but the whole thing hinges on a couple of things. And as you've just said, the tax rate. The tax rate went from 8.5 to 7.9. Then to
talking about the business
7.7.
tax,
This is the
income
business profits tax.
Yep.
All right. The business enterprise tax followed the same thing. It was at one level, another level, and it's at another level. Those who supported this, and I didn't support those tax reductions, I believe from 8.5 to 7.9 was probably the right thing to do. Because at 8.5 we were high in New England. At 7.9 we're the lowest in New England. We're the lowest business tax in New England. So that was a good place to be. But I think three things happened that deserve consideration in terms of how you justify what's happened to us economically. First of all, we had the situation we let people pay taxes which they had avoided. We had the
amnesty.
The amnesty.
Tax amnesty.
We had the amnesty program, which produced $19 million.
But that's a one-time thing.
It's a one-time
People aren't going to
thing.
come back and pay again.
Well, they're going to pay again because they've exposed themselves.
But not the back taxes.
Well, they've paid their back taxes.
Yeah.
So the amnesty provision came into play, and we got $19 million. We had an anomaly, which was the federal tax law, which lowered the tax rate at the federal level and allowed many companies to repatriate. So they brought money back to the country because there was a much lower tax rate. And we reduced the tax rate from 8.5 to 7.9. Those three things happened simultaneously. And as a result of that, we had a very good year. That anomaly is not going to continue. Just take a look at the stock market today.
Right.
It was down 800 points.
Right.
So there is on the horizon an economic, I don't want to say depression, but certainly a slowdown.
We've been expanding for 9 years.
So there's a slowdown.
It's time for a slowdown.
One of the longest expansions in our history. So we have a budget. And for the first time in many years, we have a budget that has enough money to take care of the needs of the people of the state of New Hampshire. We can address those needs.
Which is not what we always do, Senator.
No, and
we have an institutional deficit every budget season.
Well, we have the structural deficit because we don't fund things, we suspend. But indeed, we have money this time, and that money should be allocated. And there are those who believe it should be one way, those who believe it another way. But indeed, if you can't come to some kind of a consensus, you're just wasting this great opportunity, and that's something that we shouldn't do. So what are the problems? The problems are the tax rate. That has to be dealt with. Problem, education funding. How much should be spent on education funding? And then there's the rates for people who are supplying services in healthcare.
Right, which are very low.
Well, what should the increase be?
Yeah.
All right, so let's address each one of those separately, and you can quiz me on it so that we can get information to the public. Our original plan, House and Senate, was to retain the rates at 7.9 and to retain the business enterprise rate to where they were lowered to. By reducing those to the next level, you create a $90 million problem because you lose $90 million in revenue. So you got to address that.
So doesn't the governor understand that? Does he not get that when he's going around talking about we can't have this tax increase, which is really not a tax increase, just not going forward with the next level of cuts?
And Senator, that's what I was talking about. It's the next level of cuts, not the ones that came in January. It's this.
Well, see, the ones that came in January are the 7.7.
And you're okay with that?
Well, I'm only okay with it under certain circumstances. I'm only okay with that if the business enterprise tax remains at 0.700, because what you do is you mitigate the loss. And that's fine. That's fine with me. Not the best situation, but it's a compromise. And I'm willing to compromise. Lou D'Alessandro, I'm willing to compromise because it's in the best interest of passing a budget. Now, the next item is the education funding. We do $960 million in the first year. I'd like to do 960 in the second year, and with the CPI increase in the second year, the communities get more money. House has a position where they want to spend $1,043 million in the second year. That's not sustainable. At the number that I bring forward, and again, this is in our discussion, we give everybody who needs it more money. We take sustainability and we put it back in. There are no more 4% decreases. And as I said, I went through every community. I've spoken to people in the communities, the Berlins, the Claremonts, the Manchesters, the Nashuas, the Derrys, they all get more money. And at the same time, we appropriate $500,000 to study the way we fund education. Now, we've done that since John Sununu was governor. That was a long time ago. We've gone over this.
We never liked the answer, though.
Never. We had the Augenblick formula, and had we accepted the Augenblick formula, we wouldn't be in this situation now. The third thing is health, HHS. What do we do with the rates for services? What do we do with the SPU? What do we do with the children, getting them out of New Hampshire Hospital? What do we do about renovating New Hampshire Hospital so that you can take care of those who are really being mothballed in hospitals and not being taken care of?
In emergency rooms.
Right, in emergency rooms. So all of those things can be taken care of. We have the dollars to do that. Now the question is, why can't we get together? Why is one side so firm on one thing and another on the other thing? Those positions, A, they're not sustainable, and B, they're not good in terms of building a compromise. We're sensible people. We're intelligent people. We haven't been in a situation like this for a long period of time. You have to go back to the first Sununu administration, when he was governor, when we had enough money. You recall those days? Mm-hmm. I recall those days. This is the best situation we've been in. Now remember that the July revenues are less than the July revenues of a year ago. So this surplus that we had is diminished. It's not as great as it was predicted to be.
So even if you were to pass the budget now, it doesn't work the same way it worked had it been passed.
That's correct. It needs some changes.
On his desk.
It does need some changes. And the lapses from the 19 budget are going to be greater than lapses we've seen in a long time. There's a big number associated with those lapses, which again allows us to do the things on a one-time basis that we can do. And there's nothing wrong with that.
And those July numbers are lower this year because of the three things you already mentioned.
Yes.
Were pretty non-recurring things.
Yeah, and Bob, when you look down the list of revenues, they're not producing. Mm-hmm. You know, the economy is still flowing, but it's not as robust as it has been. Mm-hmm. So you get things like the individual taxes that we pay, and they're not producing at the numbers that were predicted. Mm-hmm. Plus, we've eliminated the electric consumption tax.
Yeah.
Maybe not one of your favorites, but we threw it out.
Yeah, so I didn't mind it. It was $5 million. We did
$6 million.
$6 million.
We
decided to forego it.
Right, and the average consumer paid about 9 cents. Mm-hmm. So you're not going to feel a 9 cent
No,
decrease.
You're certainly not.
So we did all of these things, and as I say, kind of not giving a lot of thought to things. But indeed, we have an opportunity to do good things, and we should take advantage of it, and we have to get together, and we have to compromise on a way to do it. And the thing that we must consider is the future. How does this all play out in our future? Because the world doesn't end at the end of the 2021 biennium.
No, probably not.
It goes beyond that.
We are in a very fortunate position. We can't afford to let this opportunity.
There's no
escape
question.
us.
There's no question
that's
about
the basic message.
Yes,
I think, isn't it?
That's the message that I carry
fortunate
for
because
it.
of the three.
We're very
unique
fortunate
things that we have going for us right now.
And we have we've done a lot of good things. We've done a lot of good things in government, and we still have to address the opioid crisis. And there's money for the Granite Shield. That money is not available because we don't have a budget. It's there, but you can't spend it because we don't have a budget.
Yeah.
And you know how badly we need that. There's money in there for Narcan, for Manchester, and for Nashua. You know how badly
Yeah,
we need that,
for
and you can't access that.
advocates for children in distress.
Sure.
And,
Absolutely, and
under
that,
threat.
that money is sitting there,
Yep.
and it can't be used.
Yep.
So we've got to come. We have got to come together, and we've got to do it before the end of September, because we can't let this continuing resolution go on for another 3 months. That's in my opinion. And,
Well, this
and
is a
I'm
time.
adamant.
This is a time where we're being told we should probably take our first break.
Yeah,
you know.
when we come back, I want to talk a little bit about the
do-
process.
I
You know,
want
how
to
do you
talk
get-
about this
How do
because
you get to yes?
There's a lot there to chew over and further explain. And I want to remind people that this is a show that's live, and you're welcome to call in at
640-3091.
640-3091.
We work well together, Bob.
We work well together, and we would really like to have participation.
Sure.
This may sound a little arcane, and if it is, call in and ask to have explanations provided. We will do that. But this is very important stuff for the future well-being of our state and the
And for our
growth of our
city.
state and the care of our citizens.
Yeah, I'm
real
concerned
needs.
how it affects Manchester. You know,
Sure.
So
Yeah.
should our viewers be, I
Right.
suppose. But we'll be right back.
Okay. Hey, we're back. This is the progress report for this Wednesday, August 14th of 2019. There'll be big doings in the city of Manchester tomorrow, as you all know, but
Woof.
tonight we're talking about a problem going back to the last legislative session, which is the fact that the House and the Senate passed a budget for the biennium, and we do budget for 2 years in New Hampshire. The
A budget, we've had 2 shows on this budget.
We've had
already.
2 shows on
This
this
is our third
budget.
one.
We're very fortunate that we have one of the really great experts and advocates for many of us here in New Hampshire. And Senator Lou D'Alessandro is Senate Finance Chair, as he has been for quite a long while, and he's been a senator for even longer than that. And we ended up with a veto of our budget and the trailer bill, which implements the budget.
Right.
And we ended up knowing that that was a possibility. Both House and Senate voted for a so-called continuing resolution, which means that we simply continue funding programs at the level of the last budget. And this is only for 3 months. It ends at the end of September. So there's a real crunch coming on. And Senator Lou has been explaining how, due to a series of circumstances that are not likely to be repeated anytime soon, we have the revenues to meet many of the needs that we've ignored for years and years, for opioid, for mental health, for education, for municipal support.
And that's not, piling a whole bunch of taxes into this budget. That's the situation that
Right.
the economy and existing circumstances dropped into our lap. It's good
Yes.
fortune as much as good planning.
Yeah.
So it's not like this budget was this major tax increase to provide this
The-
revenue.
right,
The
there
revenue's there. This budget just allocated it in places where we really, really need it bad.
Right. There was
Many important areas. And I think, Lou, you told me that you've been on many budget conference committees.
Yes.
And this is one of the few times you've actually signed on to the budget.
Yes.
Because you thought this was an excellent budget.
Yes.
In past times, you've not thought it was
That's
excellent.
correct.
You've been removed and replaced by somebody who would sign the
Right.
report.
This is the third time I've chaired the Finance Committee in my tenure in the Senate. I've served on the Finance Committee for 20 years, but my third time as chair. And I did not sign the budget at the other sessions, and I was removed from the budget. And I must say, the budget that I didn't sign, I thought was atrocious. It was a terrible budget. It became law without the governor's signature, and it included, the LLC tax, the camping tax, the gambling tax, and a series of other
remember all those things.
And they all got repealed.
They all went away. Yeah, they did.
That's not the case in this budget.
No.
That is not the case in this budget. This budget is the result of a couple of very, very lucky things. I mean, amnesty produced more money than we ever thought it would.
Yeah.
All right, 19 million.
But you can't do that every year.
No, you can't. You can do it every 5 or 6 years, but you can't do it every year. The federal tax law that came into place, the anomaly that was produced, that brought in $100 million. $100 million that we weren't expecting. And we did lower the tax from 8.5 to 7.9. That wasn't a bad idea. It put us in a position where we became the lowest tax in New England.
But-
And we're very competitive.
But Senator, that budget that you're talking about, as beautiful as it was vetoed. And
Yes.
we can't just pull that budget off the shelf right
Right.
now. We have to negotiate.
Yes,
On
yes,
our behalf have to negotiate a budget that works now.
Yes.
And maybe on the other side we have a caller. Maybe on
Right.
the other side of the call we
Sure.
can talk a little bit about how you get
Happy
to that process.
Right, absolutely.
But we got Rob on line 1, Bob.
Hey, Rob, welcome to the Progress Report. Glad you're joining us. Go right ahead.
Hey, Rob, you're going to have to turn your TV down because we're on a delay and it'll be very confusing. So turn your TV down and we can talk on the phone. Oh, looks like we might have lost him.
You there, Rob?
I'm there.
Oh, there we go.
Okay.
Excellent.
Go right ahead, Rob. We're glad to have you with us.
Hello, could you tell me what the mindset of the governor is, vetoing all these bills, including
Oh, yes.
3 bills on the gun bill situation? What is his mindset?
Well,
that's a
I
good
can't,
question,
yeah,
Rob.
I can't. The governor has vetoed 50 bills. Unbelievable.
Unbelievable.
Over the course of history, the average number of bills vetoed by the governor is about 6.5. This governor has vetoed 50 bills. And I think some of them, there's just I can't think of any reason why he would veto some of those bills. They're very good for the public. They were supported by the public. I don't understand.
And they had bipartisan support. almost all
bipartisan
of them.
support to. Yeah, I saw.
They were not passed on totally partisan votes,
No,
any of
no,
these things, I don't think.
Well, many of them weren't, and I can't understand. I can't understand some of his vetoes.
I know this is a
You
little
know who?
bit.
I don't think he wants to be governor again.
Well, you're making a good point because some of those bills were very, very popular with everybody in New Hampshire. I mean it, very popular. They had maximum public support. So I don't know why. I don't want to say anything negative about the governor. I don't think he's a bad guy, really. But I cannot understand the decision-making process.
You
It
know,
must be because there's not enough money in the budget. That's the only reason I can think of.
But that's not true. The one thing I can say is there was plenty of money in the budget. That is absolutely true. Plenty of money in the budget. Even with the bad month of July, the surplus is still at I think it's 117 million. The lapses are going to exceed 100 million. There is enough money to do everything we talked about in the budget. If you made a few changes, and again, a few changes based on the fact that we can compromise, but there's money. This is the first budget I've dealt with in many, many, many years where there actually is money.
and we're blowing it. We're blowing it because of this veto. Okay, Rob.
Thank you very much for talking about it.
Well, thank
Thanks
you for
for the call,
calling, Rob. I just have to mention one veto that really set me back, and it, not our beloved energy bills, the net metering bill and the
Right.
biomass support bill, which we're going to have a major effort to override. We'll
Yes.
be back for overrides in September
Right.
18 and 19. Those will be days to watch, folks, as we attempt to override some of the governor's 50 vetoes. But the one that just really shocked me was the Independent Redistricting Commission. If there was one thing I thought was good government, it was to take the setting of electoral districts out of the hands of the prevailing political party, which tends to operate to favor themselves. They certainly did that in 2010 when the Republicans controlled. They created
And in
districts that
2000.
were very, very
And in 1990.
much in their favor. So
And in 1980.
yeah. Okay. Well, it's a long history here.
Right.
And yet he vetoed that to have an independent redistricting bill. So we could get out of this thing about whichever party's in power at the time of the census and the year after when we redistrict, they just manipulate the thing to favor themselves. And he vetoed that. I mean, really, I think he should be. I think he really, I mean, the budget's bad enough. This is another really bad one, in my opinion. But anyway.
Senator, before the call, and it was a great call with some good questions, I want to talk a little bit, just because I don't know the answer. How do you, as chairman of Senate Finance, and Donna Soucy, president of the Senate, and the folks over at the House, what's the process? Is it face to face? Do you work every day at it? Do you let time pass? Is it kind of a dating ritual where if they don't call for 3 days, it's a problem? How's it work, Senator?
Well, I've worked on the budget every day since the governor vetoed the budget. I'm up in my office, I'm working on it. I've worked with President Soucy. I've worked with Dan Feltus. We've had meetings with the House, and we exchange ideas. We've had a couple of meetings with the governor. Now, the question that really never gets addressed is proposals that come to the table, and do we discuss those and say, well, what about this versus this, and so forth and so on. We haven't gotten down to that. That's real negotiations. What we've had is conversations. We need negotiations. Where do we stand? What can we tolerate? What can he tolerate? And what's best for the state? Those are negotiations.
Sounds like that hasn't started yet.
Yeah,
You're
well,
kind of feeling each other out,
Yep.
and getting a sense of what
Right.
the other guy wants.
Yeah, and we're doing proposals. I did a proposal today and sent it to the majority leader, Dan Feltus. He sent a proposal to me. He's gone on vacation for a week. I think he's going to be in Iowa with his children, and that's where he's from. But I sent him a proposal today, and the Senate Democrats will have a conference call, I believe, on Friday to talk about the budget. And I think they must be doing the same thing in the House. Mary Jane is very cooperative and I think very open to talking with her membership. But remember, on the House side, you got 400 people. Mm-hmm. And what have you got? 230 something in the Democratic caucus. How do you touch base with 230 people? And you can't bring them back because didn't you suspend mileage for the months of July and August?
Yeah.
So you can't.
We don't even get mileage for veto day.
Right. So, well, it's a problem. All right. It's a problem, and as a result, that mediation situation, that constructive discussion, it's very difficult to put together.
And that's why I'm asking.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's a good
everybody's
question,
off on
sure.
vacation, and I mean,
And-
even Dan Feltus is going to be away for a week
Right,
during the,
but
and we
I
only
mean,
have
he'll
6
be-
to go. You know.
I'm sure he'll be in touch, and I'm sure Dan Feltus has been working on this.
I'm not disparaging
No,
him,
no,
I'm
no.
just,
I understand.
you know.
But he's our majority leader in the Senate. Donna's the president of the Senate, and I work with him. But I spend every day. I'm unique in this concept. I get in every day. I work on this every day. I work with the Legislative Budget Office every day. I'm either sending them an email or I'm walking down to their office. That's how important I think this is, how significant this is. Put $40 million in this budget to give back to communities on a one-time basis because we've taken revenue sharing away. Given this opportunity, we have a chance to do something for the communities, to give them some money. And we're basing it on free and reduced price lunch and on population. They haven't seen that in a long time. Probably won't see it for a long time.
No, that
But
was the O'Brien era that took that away from us.
O'Brien destroyed the state. He had the destruction of the state as his number one priority, and he came close to doing it. Had he been reelected, I think we would have been in worse shape, to be honest with you. Maybe devastating shape. That was a terrible, terrible time. A terrible time. We've gotten out of that. We're in a better time as we speak. And the question is, why don't we take advantage of this better time?
So what I'm hearing, Senator, is that from the people I've been trying to talk about here, how your negotiations are going,
Right.
the governor's statement is pretty much the same thing every time. I'm not going to vote for anything that I can decree to be a tax increase. And with that, he includes not going forward with the next scheduled tax decrease in the business profits and
Right.
the business enterprise tax.
Right.
He thinks the failure to implement that, which of course is in effect implemented under the continuing resolution,
Right.
because it was in the law in the prior budget, and that's the thing. And it seems to me, as I looked at the negotiations, between your work in the Senate and the House, we gave him everything else that he was objecting to.
Oh, I think he got.
He
did
got
get-
everything.
He did get everything.
He didn't get the family medical leave.
Paid
and
family leave
paid
is
family
out.
leave.
The
That was-
capital gains
capital
tax is
gains
out.
tax was out.
He got the SPU. He got the renovation of the hospital. He got
Yep.
the children moved out of the hospital.
Everything he wanted, but the one thing it sticks in him, and it's just an ED fixe, I guess they call it, in his mind, is I can't be charged with
with raising a tax.
with raising the tax, even though it's really not raising the tax, it's just holding the tax cuts
Exactly.
that exist at the current level.
Exactly.
And is there any chance that he's going to bend on that? And if he doesn't bend on that, where can you go with all your compromises?
Well, we can't go anyplace.
Yeah.
And I think even in the most difficult situations, and that maybe this is what the governor perceives, saying he would do something and wouldn't back on it. Listen, great men have made decisions and changed their mind. The problem is profiles in courage is only this thick.
Yeah.
It should be this thick,
Right.
but it isn't. And as a result of that, it takes a very strong individual, big backbone to say, listen, let's do what's right for the people. You know, people talk about Lyndon Johnson one way or the other in the Vietnam conflict, but let me tell you something. There would have been no Voting Rights Act. There would have been no Civil Rights Act
Right.
had he not really pushed. And people exercised profiles in courage because they lost their seats in the Senate
Yeah.
as a result of that. But what was done at that point in time was good for America.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was good for America. And I've talked to people. Can you imagine that passing today
Yeah.
in the Congress of the
Oh,
United
God.
States? Not a shot.
Not a chance.
So,
not a
so
chance.
we got to exercise profiles and
with this
profiles and
Republican
courage.
But the governor
and-
seems to be just becoming more dug in. So I don't know. You know, is
Can I
there,
throw something out
Sure.
there? I really I know we got a break
Go ahead.
coming up, but and I understand this is radical, and I understand what I'm asking, but why not just say, okay, Governor, look, we've given it we've given you 6 weeks, we've given you every proposal we have, we're done, no continuing resolution, Governor. Ball's in your court. Why do we give him that exit door?
Well, you know, I've never.
I know, I understand, Senator.
I've never seen
it's-
it happen. But indeed, that's a government shutdown.
yeah.
That's
Because
what
because
what happened.
states
Right.
are different than the federal government.
And
That would be
Lou
a
and
shutdown.
his colleagues and the majority in both houses would get blamed for that. That's why we don't do it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Nobody wants a government shutdown, but that's exactly what would happen.
See, I
government
don't
shutdown.
understand where when you have a House and a Senate who have come together, made compromises, produced the best budget you've seen in 20 years, one that you could get behind, and then puts that to the governor and he vetoes it. How is that the Senate and House's problem? I don't understand that a bit because he's vetoing it on ideological grounds, insane ideological grounds, by the way. I mean, this whole idea that not having a budget decrease is a tax decrease is a tax increase. The Republicans have been talking like that for years. It doesn't make a bit of sense.
Yeah, but people buy it though. That's the problem.
And the problem with a government shutdown is nobody wins and everybody suffers. And
Yeah.
that just can't
Well, we're
happen.
suffering enough as it is already, I suppose.
That
So
just- that just
Well, to
can't
be
happen.
suffering like this when we have the revenue.
I'm so frustrated. I'm as frustrated as you are, Senator, because this governor we have, he's operating from a severe position of weakness. He doesn't have the House. He doesn't have the Senate. Polls show, people talk. Everybody wants this done, and this one man is able to hold everything up. It's very frustrating that and there's no accountability for him until next November of 2020.
The fact is, we're still talking to him, and I think that's important, that the lines of communication have not been shut down. And I think it's up to us to convince him, and it's for him to look at this in terms of reality. And reality says, you were elected by the people to serve the people. And when you took that oath of office, you said you would do what you could for the people of the state of New Hampshire. Let's put that into perspective. That's getting something done. Yeah. And that has to be done. Now, I've been around a long time. I've been around the legislature a long time. I think when Benson was elected governor, he almost had veto on his mind. Yeah. Right? He had this big stick. I don't think that was the case with this governor, with Governor Sununu. I think I just don't think he's thinking about it with everybody in mind. You know what I'm saying? Looking at the big picture. And
maybe not, but I think he's beginning to think more and more like Trump is about, all I care about is my base. And my base hates taxes, and if I can say I'm stopping a tax increase.
But hasn't New Hampshire moved on from that? I mean,
I hope so.
I mean, that's what worries me. I mean, he seems very genial and pleasant to deal with on a personal level, but I think he's getting more and more rigidly ideological as this goes on.
It appears that way.
Yeah.
It appears. Listen, I had very high hopes for our negotiations. Mm-hmm. Very high hopes. I had a good relationship with the governor. I think I've got a good relationship with our caucus. I'm very much to the center. Our caucus is a little bit to the left.
Yeah.
Okay, but I'm very much to the center, and
the proof is that you didn't favor the capital gains tax proposal that came from the House, which
and I think at this point in time, cooler heads have got to prevail.
Yeah.
Really, cooler heads must prevail.
Well, it's a good thing I'm not in the conversation, as evidenced by my last question. I do understand that.
Well, I think it is what it is. I'm reminded of the decision-making process, and think of this analogy, because it's fitting, I think. When Kennedy came into office, the Cuban invasion was part and parcel of the deal.
Yeah.
And what he did was he listened to those who were in power, and he carried it out.
It was a fiasco.
It was a fiasco.
And he said, I'm not going to do that again.
I'm not going to do that again.
Yeah.
And he learned his lesson during the Cuban Missile Crisis because he brought people together. And for 13 days, they were locked up in the White House, and he listened to them. He listened to the conversation, and he made the right decision which saved the world. That's a pretty damn good example, of listening to people and bringing people together. And I don't think all of the people in that room were of the same mindset.
No.
And that's why it was successful.
It's probably one or two Dr. Strange.
Probably. And some the other way. But I think that's an example of listening to people and indeed taking counsel.
Yeah.
And my other great example is Walter Peterson. Nobody that I know of did it better. Walter would bring us together with his cabinet and listen to what people had to say and get everybody's opinion.
Let's remember Walter Peterson was a great governor.
Yeah, great governor,
wonderful
great
man,
human
great
being.
Governor, and he is the one that gave us the current tax situation.
He gave us the business profits tax.
Profit and the business enterprise tax, and did away with the stock and trade tax.
He did away with the inventory tax, right.
Hey, we're called on to take our break. Brian's flashing us. It's time for our second and final break. So we'll take that now, folks. We've had one great call. We'll welcome others. 640-3091. When we come back, we'll talk about the governor's veto of the budget. We may have more to say about that. We have other vetoes we'd like to talk about and what that portends. So we'll be right back with this edition of the Progress Report. Folks, if you're just joining, this is the progress report for tonight, Wednesday, August 14th. And we're very glad to have back, not as a co-host, but as our special guest, Senate's Finance Chair Lou D'Alessandro, long-term serving the public in many capacities, executive counselor. You served in the House, too, didn't you?
Yes, I
Yeah,
did.
Served in the House.
Served in the House.
And what, 10 terms in the Senate?
11.
11, my goodness. And now is serving a long time as Senate Finance Chair. And we're talking about the many implications, not good implications, of the governor's decision to veto the state budget for the next biennium, which would have gone into effect on July 1st for the next 2 years, but the veto stopped that. So the state is operating on what's called a continuing resolution, because both houses knew that this was a possibility, this veto, and so to keep the government open, we have a continuing resolution that continues funding at the level of the last budget for 3 months, and it's up in September. And if we don't get this solved, we're going to pass up on an enormous opportunity to benefit so many citizens in need in New Hampshire, and communities, and schools, and municipalities, and the people needing mental health protection, the better rates for reimbursement for providers of our
Yes. Yeah.
our healthcare system. The people that take care of our seniors and people in need. All these things are at risk as this impasse goes on. And we've had an excellent call on this. We'd welcome some more. And I don't know how much further you want to go on this, Lou, but you got anything further you'd like to? You too, Mike.
No, I mean, I think the senator has explained what needs to be done and the process of getting it done. All we need now is the governor to contemplate the situation, I think.
Well, we need heads to get together. We need
At least
cooler
you're
heads to
still
prevail.
talking, right?
Oh, absolutely.
How often are you
absolutely.
talking with the governor?
We're meeting again on the 27th with the governor. So
Yeah.
every other week, and I talked with the governor's budget officer every day. I spoke with him today. Today was an executive council meeting,
Yeah.
so I gave him a call later this afternoon. But conversation's important, and we're constantly talking amongst ourselves. As I said, I got an email from Dan Feltus today. I sent him an email about some of my suggestions. We're going to have a conference call on Friday to talk about this. So conversation goes on. You can never stop talking. It's
Well,
so
that's the
important.
best news, because
Yeah.
it seems to me the governor's position is becoming
Is there
more
any-
rigid rather than more flexible.
right.
Is there any discussion of just allowing those tax decreases to take place and just
Well, we talk
adjusting the
about
numbers?
it. We talk about it all the time. Believe me, it's and I've tried to come up with different scenarios. Well, what happens if you do this? What happens if you do this? What happens if you do that? And try to balance them. Every.
But the problem
everyone
is
has
you
a
let that
balance.
next round of tax increase, what'd you say, it's $90 million hit to our revenue?
Yes.
And, we're in a position where, we'll never get that revenue back, I don't think.
Oh no, there's no
No,
question.
Never
not
get
with
it
not with the economy turning the way it is. It's,
Yeah.
No, the economy is going to become flat. There's no question. There's
we're
no
lucky.
question about that. Yeah, if we're fortunate.
If we're lucky, yeah.
And if the current administration at the national level doesn't destroy the world.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I'm fearful of. I'm fearful of North Korea. I'm very fearful of Iran. I'm very fearful of what's happening in Israel. Those are powder kegs. That
Well,
can
on
have a
top of that,
dramatic
he's
effect on the
abrogating
world.
all our arms control treaties.
Oh, he's
I mean, that's
thrown them
the
out.
thing that's most scary.
Oh,
We're
that-
going back to the 60s where we had
Right.
uncontrolled arms
The
warfare.
scariest
I mean,
thing
you
of all.
know,
Oh,
mighty
right.
costly.
It's
That's
mighty
very-
costly.
If we're in
Very
another
costly.
arms race.
Yeah, well, we are in another arms race, to be honest with you. Look at the money we're spending on the military.
Yeah,
Look at the appropriation.
yeah.
Warren Rudman said to me, we'd never have sequestration. But we did.
But we did.
But now how does Trump get around it?
No, he will.
Yeah, sure, he gets around it by saying it's an emergency.
Yeah.
And you take money from here and you put it money there and so forth and so on. So he's manipulating the government. But I think the most unbelievable thing was the former Attorney General of the state of Virginia wanting to change the salutation on the Statue of Liberty.
Oh dear Lord, I know.
Now, come on.
Yeah.
And he's an Italo-American.
With a name like Cuccinelli and
he's
everything,
an
right?
embarrassment. He's an embarrassment. I couldn't believe that. And that's
Give me
And
your
he said it
huddle,
with
you
a straight
poor.
face. He said
Well,
it
how
with a
about
straight
those poor? As long as they're going to stay on their
Right,
feet and they're
right.
not going to use any services,
Oh, my
and they
God.
can fund themselves. Well, yeah.
that would talk about an insult.
Yeah.
Oh, and talk about a lack of human compassion.
Yeah.
My God.
Or understanding of his own personal
All right,
history, Senator.
And to indeed say it.
Yeah.
You know, and say it as a public spokesman for the administration.
Yeah. I tell you,
Oh,
it's
Christ! I mean, that
unbelievable.
it is unbelievable.
Yeah.
And that situation in Siberia, that missile,
Oh yeah.
and what's happened as a result of that. Is that another Chernobyl? You know, Chernobyl was kept quiet for a long time before
yeah,
they let
they're
the
not
truth
Chernobyl
out.
had a big role in bringing down the Soviet Union. We tend to forget that.
Yeah.
But the Russian people had finally had it when they lied about what Chernobyl was about.
Absolutely.
They pretended it was not a big deal.
That
And you know the
thing's-
Chernobyl disaster was never revealed by the Russians. It was discovered by a worker going into a Swedish nuclear plant that registered high radiation.
Yes,
That's how
yeah.
the world found out about
Right,
Chernobyl. It had nothing
right,
to do with the Russians
right.
coming clean about
Yeah.
the worst catastrophe in the history of nuclear power.
And that's still burning.
It's still burning.
It's still
Yeah.
burning.
And
They-
the idea that they were going to make these nuclear-powered cruise
Missiles. I know.
I mean, these are low-flying missiles, and out
Right.
the tailpipe is coming radioactive debris across their entire flight path.
Yeah.
Oh my God!
And five people died
5 people died.
before they let the public know whatever happened, and God knows who else passed away. But you know, we're back into that craziness.
Yeah.
And
And as I
feeding
say,
that craziness.
You know, speaking of
the
craziness,
abrogating all these anti-missile and disarmament treaties is
It's unbelievable.
I want to bring it back to New Hampshire. Speaking
Yep.
of craziness, in this time when we had not one but 2 mass shootings, and we've had
Yes.
255 mass shootings in some 200 days in this country this year alone, and 3 very reasonable, very conservative,
modest,
very modest
modest.
gun regulation bills come before Governor Sununu, and he vetoes them the same week
Yeah.
that these people have died. Can you talk a
And-
little bit about
Well,
that?
yeah,
I mean, I think
I-
it's an absolute shame, and I think he should be politically punished for it.
Well, I think it's a shame. I predicted he'd sign them, so that shows you how much I know.
Yeah.
I said he's got to sign these. They have enormous public support.
97%
And-
support for background
Okay.
checks.
Now-
88% of Republican support for background checks.
I thought two out of the 3 he should have signed, and he should have let the third one become law without a signature if he was that opposed to it. But this one really hurt me as a human being, because I as I said, I have a good relationship with him. I'm saying I have a friendship with him. I ran against his father, who crucified me in the campaign. He destroyed me in the campaign, right?
I always thought this governor was a little bit nicer
I
person
thought
than his
much
father.
I thought much nicer, but indeed, I was really shaken by the fact that he vetoed those. Truly, I thought he would sign 2 of the 3 of them. Again, shows you how much I know about things. But indeed,
And
it is
from
what it is.
the point of view of my committee, Science, Technology, Energy, he vetoed a whole bunch of our bills,
Yep.
including the biggest ones, the net metering bill,
Yes.
which is so
Which hurts
important. to
Manchester.
Which hurts Manchester in a big
Manchester.
way. Mayor Craig will tell you how much she wanted that to go forward with our project at the Dunbarton old landfill site, which
right.
is not going to be used for garden apartments,
Right.
but it's perfect for putting up solar panels.
right,
Without
that's for
that,
sure.
Nashua has the same thing with their hydro facilities. Businesses have the same thing, like Monadnock Paper and others
Yep.
that have hydro facilities that they could upgrade and contribute to no carbon emitting, no pollution emitting energy sources to help cut down on our need to rely on those sources.
And cut taxes for taxpayers in the
Well,
city
cut
of
taxes.
Manchester.
Yeah.
Let's take Monadnock Paper, for example. There's a company that's been around for a long time. The Verneys, the family, the Verney family, very, very, very active in Manchester during the Second World War, actually made parachutes on the west side.
I didn't know that.
Right across the street
about
from
that?
where St. Mary's Bank is, up in that building.
Yeah.
We're down to 15 cent-
My father-in-law
seconds.
ran that.
No kidding.
Yeah, ran
Really?
that development. Yeah.
Yeah, you have
so
found a
so
history.
here's a situation where you got a company that remains in New Hampshire, makes that first-class paper, specialty paper.
Yeah.
And I got a call from Mr. Verney. I called him back and said I don't I don't understand it. There are certain things I don't get. That's
Well,
one of
we
them.
think we got a chance.
Yeah.
maybe even a good chance of overriding some of these vetoes.
Well, I think we do have.
There's
a good chance.
50 of them.
Yeah, there's
the
50.
Republicans
It's
give
going to
him
be a long
47.
veto day, huh,
It'll
boy?
be-
Oh, it's going to be 2
two.
days.
2
It's going to
days.
be 2 days, no
2
doubt.
days, right.
Okay. Well, I guess that wraps up this hour. It's always great when Senator Lou, with all his experience and his knowledge, can join us here, and we're pleased he did it. I
Thank
do
you.
want to say I think next week we're coming on with Gene Martin, who's the city chair for the Manchester Democrats, doing a great job. But he's also a candidate for school committee at large.
Wow.
And we're very excited about that, and we're going to
He'll
welcome
kick
him next
off
week.
our candidate forums that we're going to do.
And we got to have you on as a candidate too sometime.
I come on every once in a while.
Well, thanks so much. It's been a great night.
It's been a great night. It is.
Yeah.
Really, really,
And,
very
hope-
good,
hope-
clear explanation.
Hope that it's helpful. That's the key.
That's
we want
the
to be
key.
helpful in terms
Call
of
the governor's
getting
office.
the word out. Yeah.
Yep.
Call the governor's office.
Tell him you
Absolutely.
watch the progress report and you've had it. He's got to sign this
Yeah.
this
It's
budget.
got to. We've
Get
got
out
to.
of his
We've got to do
ideology and do
something.
what's right for the people. Okay. See you next week, folks.
See you next week.